I had a friend approach me and ask me, do you think it's the end times? We got plague, we got unrest, we got war. We seem to have a lot of the horsemen of the Bible. Do you think this is the end times? I'm like, I don't even think it's the beginning of the end times. The end times from the Bible is going to be a long time until that because, the more you learn about history, the further back you go, decade by decade, there's going to be some group or somebody thinking it's the end times, making connections that don't necessarily mean that it's even the beginning of the end times. Um, you know, so there's two reasons that people do that mainly. There's other reasons, but there's a couple that is my idea of why people do it. One is that we really want to see if we're right about what we believe. That's exactly what it is. We want to see if we're right about what we believe, if God is okay with us, if how long humanity is going to last, because we're going to die soon. We don't live here that long, and we have this idea that when we die, humanity should be near the end, near dying, because we make ourselves the moral center of the universe a lot of the time because of our ego. And two, it's easy to look at conflict because it sticks out at us. And we have many emotions about various conflicts. There's hardly a conflict in the world that we don't have strong emotions about. We view a lot of conflict as, if we're on one side, the other side is like the ultimate evil. I'll give you an example. One of the popes thought that, the Pope at the time, Martin Luther, started his Protestant Reformation. The Pope at the time thought that Martin Luther was the Antichrist, and Martin Luther thought that the Pope was Antichrist because that was the one evil that they were facing, the one evil. They were looking across the aisle, if you were, and they were like, okay, what's worse than this? Because this is the worst for me, so it must be the worst for everybody. It all comes back to the ego. And when we're looking at modern times, at what's happening right now, COVID-19, and then we got George Floyd murdered by police officers, and now there's protests around the world. It sparked protests even in Australia about the rights of Aboriginal people. I think New Zealand as well, but I mean, it's been not only there, but in other places around the world. It's like, yeah, people of color have been, basically put down to the lowest level, and their lives don't matter as much as other people's. I've had a lot of people say, oh, Black Lives Matter just says only Black Lives Matter. That's not the case, man. The case is that they're saying that, all lives matter, of course. If you say all lives matter, then you're not looking at the issue. Because, of course, all lives matter. They're saying Black lives don't matter as much as every other life because Black people are killed in a higher percentage when they actually, as per their population, they actually commit a lower level of their population's crimes. A higher percentage of the white population commits more crimes. A lower percentage of the African American population commits crimes. And yet, more African Americans are killed, more African Americans are put into the jail system, the prison system, and more African Americans just really get the butt of the gun and not the consideration of the welcoming handshake from those in power. Because it's easier to enact force on a minority that everybody already is has a little bit of a misunderstanding with, or a little bit of racism towards, than to take somebody of your own skin color from a middle class, wealthy, or even poor class because of their skin color. It's easier to attack those who there is racism that exists against. And a lot of police officers will say there's no quotas, but there's quotas when it comes to, just look up New York police chief talks to one of his captains or one of his officers about, hey, you need to go after Black people and Mexican people. We need to lock up more. This is the people you should go after, and you need to write tickets. You need to write more and more tickets. Write tickets for these people. And I would myself say that growing up, so I moved in this town in middle school, from Arlington to Flower Mound. And so there's very few African Americans in Flower Mound and in the surrounding area. But I found when I had run-ins with the police with them, and no, don't get me wrong, I was committing crimes at the time. They were all misdemeanors, but I wasn't the greatest guy ever in high school. But for some reason, my cuffs were always looser. I was always treated a little bit more fair. Sometimes more than a little bit. I was like completely, had a completely different, relationship with the police, because on their side, they didn't want to hurt me because they viewed me as one of them. And in my mind, it really pissed me off. Even being a bad person at the time, it really pissed me off. I've told this story before. When I was we were taken back to the police station, and I was in the interrogation room. My friend was in another room, and so I was pissed off that my friend, who is of color, had really tight handcuffs on him, and I was like, "That's not right." Why? And then they called him boy, and I was just like, "Nope." So what I did, when they left me alone in the interrogation room, I got up and I spit on the police officer's chair. Not my proudest moment. Wouldn't recommend it. Don't believe in it. But that's what I did at the time when I was a teenager. And when the guy came in the room, he's like, "Did you spit on my chair? Clean that up." I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about." He's like, "You idiot, there's a camera right there." I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." 3 other cops come in. So there's these 4 burly cops, and I'm in the corner in a chair, and they're just yelling at me, "Hey, clean that up, what's wrong with you, blah, blah, blah." And they're just yelling at me. I'm like, "Nope, I don't know what you're talking about." I was like, "Please beat me up so I can sue you." I was just thinking to myself, like, please, and at the time, I didn't care if I died. I'm like, if I die from this, there's still going to be hell to pay for all y'all. That's the kind of mindset I was in. I didn't care if I died, and I was just a chaotic person because I was a schizophrenic that was not medicated in high school years. So you can imagine that somebody who needs medication, who doesn't have it, for a serious mental illness, and is in high school and in his teen years, yeah, that's the kind of person I was. I was ready to die if necessary. And I might have just been ready to die just to put one up on him, because I didn't really care if I lived at that time. But the funny thing is, they kept on yelling at me. The sergeant came into the interrogation room. He's like, "Hey, all of you out of the police station." Gets all the cops out of the police station. Not just those 4, but every other cop. Because they were yelling at me, a white person. And then so the sergeant sits between our 2 interrogation rooms and just watches us. He's just like sitting there like, okay, just watching us. And I slip out of my handcuffs because they're so loose, because I'm white. And he's like, "I hope you're not trying to get out of your cuffs. That's not going to work for you." And I'm like, okay, what are the probability that I can get out of this police station? I have my cuffs off, but the sergeant is in the hallway right there sitting down. And I was like, there's no way I'm getting out of here. So I put my hands back in the cuffs. Easy peasy. Of course, my cuffs were loose. And so the night eventually ended when, later on, blah, blah, blah. So that's not the only time this happened, by the way. That's not like the one thing that happened that makes me believe that police are biased. There's been other instances, but I'm just explaining this as an example. And this is my example for this video. I've mentioned it other times, but this one was so blatant. So blatant. Like, I was just begging to get my butt kicked, and I couldn't even do it. They wouldn't do it. I was begging for it. I wasn't even scared. I'm just like, I know they're going to beat me up real bad. I was like, I don't even care. Come on, man. I'll sue y'all afterwards. And I didn't even tell that to them. But they were like, "Oh, white kid. Oh, crap. Guess we can't beat him up." Sergeant got him out of the police station. Now, contrast that with some of my friends that have been in police stations that are African American. A little bit different. You do something a tiny bit wrong, you get more than just getting yelled at. That's for sure. But regardless, there is a disparity between so-called races as far as being treated by law enforcement. I've met a lot of great cops. There's been cops where I was like, man, this is a great cop. But there's a percentage that looks for certain people, for sure. So allow this to translate into, this is kind of a weird direction to take it, but let's move on into picking up energy. So for me, the reason I was able to tell if a cop was racist, or before they would even do anything, but if they were a bad cop, or if they were just lazy, or perhaps they're a good cop but they're just tired, or even they're just a great cop and they're going to be nice. I've always kind of been an empath. Kind of. I'm not like a very powerful empath, but kind of. I've always had a little bit of a spiritual gift for it. So with my gift, I'm able to read people fairly well, even with a minor empath gift. Uh, um, I can read people fairly well, even starting out in my teen years, and even in childhood, I was watching people. I'm like, okay, these are their motivations. As early as 5 or 7, I was watching people and being like, okay, this is what they want. This is why they're doing this or that. And the disturbing thing is, I have read a lot of racism in a lot of police officers, but not just police officers, but people in political positions. Even if they're minor, in authority positions, if you will. Even the lowest authority position as a principal at a high school. And racism. Not only do I get the hatred because of somebody's so-called race, we're all one race. It doesn't make any sense. The race isn't a thing. We're not even as different as different breeds of dog, and they're not separate races. But anyway, I get this stupid idea from white supremacists. Oh, yeah, we're all different races. Scientists have proven it. No, that's not a thing. We're not even as different as different breeds of dog, and they're one race. So how can we possibly be different races? It makes no sense. We can be susceptible to different diseases and viruses, but that doesn't constitute different races. That makes no sense. Bone structure also doesn't constitute different races. Facial bone structure. The color of your skin does not constitute different races. All of that is just made up. And you know what's just behind that feeling that I also read on people? Is fear. Because that person has grown up with a family or perhaps a culture that is afraid of a certain kind of people. And guess what that kind of people is? I don't need to draw the lines for you. Of course, there's variations. I mean, I've met cops that are more afraid of black people than Mexican people, or the reverse. But if you watch people, if you try to project your mind one-pointedly at a person as they're communicating with somebody else, you can read a lot. So when they're communicating with somebody else, it's much easier to read somebody. Very easy. So posture. So if somebody walks up to you like this, arms to the side, kind of standing straight, and their elbows are even slightly raised, and they start off by not looking at you, but then they zoom in on you and start looking into your eyes, they're coming at you from a discomfort of what they've already assumed that you are as an individual or the situation is. These are just very basic things. If somebody is talking to you across a desk or at a table and they have their arms like this, or even standing up, if they have their arms like this or like this, really closed in though, you look at the elbows. They're trying to comfort themselves. This is the comfort zone. Honestly, if you look at Donald Trump, a lot of the time when he's at at a meeting in the White House, he'll be sitting like this. He's trying to comfort himself. There's something, he doesn't feel comfortable. He's pulling a lot of stuff out of his butt and saying it, but he doesn't feel comfortable because he's like this. He's trying to comfort himself subconsciously. He's not thinking, oh, I got to comfort myself. That's not how it works. So if you want to look relaxed, even if you're not relaxed, if you're sitting down and you're talking to somebody, lean back just a bit and put your arms wide. And then move your hands a lot when you're talking. And, if you're just use these kind of motions. And that maybe even if you're talking about a particular point, kind of tap the desk or tap the table. That subconsciously sends two messages. One, that you are open towards an individual. They'll read that by accident. And two, that you have a certain level of sureness about yourself and maybe even dominating the situation without being dominating. They'll be like, oh, okay, this person is comfortable with himself without really thinking it. In the higher brain, the lower brain, subconscious, they will make that conclusion. Now, you got to be careful because when you're communicating with people, the more you move your arms, the more people are drawn to you, and that's especially good for men who are trying to attract a woman or talking to a woman. I think it's good for women as well, but especially with men, the more facial expression and the more you move your hands, the more animated you are, it's more likely to draw somebody in that you want to be closer to, whatever that might be. So there's another thing to look for. Now this is, when it comes to eye contact, if you're looking into somebody's eyes, if you're very intently looking into somebody's eyes, you must nod your head. You don't want to just sit still and look into somebody's eyes. You must nod your head, kind of like say, that makes sense. Maybe move your hand like that, whether you're sitting down or standing up. But this is a problem for me. Ever since once I kind of went over the hurdle of not being able to communicate very well because I'm schizophrenic. Once I got over that hurdle, I started to realize these things, and I kind of learned over time. But now I can look into somebody's eye, but I do it very intently. Like I focus on not even both eyes, but one iris, and I just look. And it makes a lot of people really uncomfortable. So I try not to remain eye contact the whole time because I just like I'm burrowing into their brain. It feels like to a lot of people, and then I'll see them kind of like look around with their eyes like this, while they're talking. So I try to avert my eyes and nod my head still, and kind of look outside and nod because I'm not trying to make somebody feel uncomfortable. But I definitely can by accident, so that's why I learned to kind of avert my eyes regularly, especially if I'm not getting into a conversation where I want to lock in the conversation for a long period of time. Hands behind the back, classic one. You feel like you don't even need to have your hands out. You feel powerful enough in the situation with your self-confidence, with your understanding and lack of mental turmoil that you can just put your hands behind your back and hang out. You don't need to use your hands. But this is more of a power. This is more of a power sign. If it's a power thing and you're walking into a room or you're walking alongside somebody and it's not like an intimate relationship, you want to put your hands behind your back a lot of the time because you want to say, I don't need my hands. I don't need to defend myself ultimately. That's kind of what you're saying without them really realizing it consciously. So, bunching up like this, if you're playing a game, like a game of cards, and looking up like this, don't do that. That means that you're unsure and that you don't really like your hand. If you kind of relax and then you kind of look around, then you're more confident about your hand. This is going to be applied to social interactions as well. There's a lot of different little things that people do. And I enjoy watching people and learning new things because I'm a people watcher. I'm not a bird watcher, but I'm a people watcher. I feel like I should have my own book, like, I got to cross this kind of person off. But these skills have let me see what people in authority, like police officers, what their demeanor is. And when they completely slack their face, eyes go kind of like, your eyelid kind of goes mid-eye, motionless face, that means that they're not hearing you. They've already decided what they're going to do. If they're looking at you like this, and their eyebrows a little bit furrowed or something, they're like, come on, really? And if they're looking at you like, if they're leaning back with one eyebrow up, you might just like want to try to change the subject. But at any rate, I'm going into too many little things. Just keep an eye on people. I've observed many police officers feel a lot of different ways without them really realizing that they communicated a lot to me. I kind of wanted to turn this video into a different kind of video, but I don't have enough time as far as the length that I want to make it. So, this has been my assessment of the political situation in the United States right now and how to read people in power. At any rate, thank you very much for watching and I hope to see all of you on the channel in the future.